Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, November 8th, 2019. Time for another show, but not just any show, a Friday show. And you know what we like to try to do with those Friday shows. We have an awful lot to catch up on today. I don't know if anything jumps out at me on the upcoming story radar yet, but we'll see how things fall out as we comb through the many, many stories and roundups and analyses of all the things that are happening. An unbelievable fire hose of news. Even just on the impeachment front, you could spend hours, as many people actually are spending hours doing this stuff, producing this material for us. We might as well read some of it. Lots to catch up on. Lots to speculate on. Much to there's an awful lot happening today. As a matter of fact, I don't know if there's any additional hearings, but next week, I guess, begins the public phase of things. There may yet still be some closed-door depositions that they have to take care of. There are certainly people who aren't showing up for their depositions. It sounds like Mick Mulvaney got his subpoena, but is refusing to show up, and now it is back again, once again, open to question with respect to whether or not Michael Bolton. Oh, can you believe I can still do this? Why? I don't even care. I'm not a Michael Bolton fan. I don't think about Michael Bolton. I guess he's just the more famous of the Boltons. John Bolton, though, turns out that he won't be showing up after all. It doesn't sound like the legal cases about whether or not he'd be compelled to show up also are not going to reach resolution, but we do have to do some clearing up about that one. In discussion, I think, of the case yesterday, I did so without my notes in front of me, as usually the case anyway. It's not unusual for me to try to do something like that. But yeah, as it turns out, we can go and catch up on some of those things. The Kupperman case, on which it looked like Bolton might depend, got delayed somewhat. But I think yesterday I thought I had seen that it was a Trump-appointed judge who had decided to delay things. It's not, although it's a George W. Bush-appointed judge. I don't really know whether or not it seemed like from the online discussion that people were pretty sure that this was a fairly conservative judge and that they might have done this on purpose in order to drag things out. I don't actually know about the judge's record. Judge Leon, I don't know whether he says Leon or Leon for the pronunciation of his last name. But at any rate, not a Trump-appointed judge, although I did see also yesterday somewhere that word had gone out that it was now official that Trump had appointed fully 1/4 of the circuit court judges. If I have that reading correct, we'll see if we can't unearth that tweet. Although I'm noting for the record that the pencil that I had here, hey kids, give me my pencil back. Someone must have done some math homework in the neighborhood of the Kagro in the Morning World Headquarters and taken the pencil with which I scroll notes to myself about what tweets I need to dig up for the summary. Well, all right, maybe we can flash a reminder across one or another of the screens later on to dig up the word on the 1/4 of the appellate judiciary having been appointed by Donald Trump. Pretty scary for only 3 years, by the way. But really not much you can do about it. We left it on the table. It's true. And shouldn't have, but did. And now we suffer the consequences for it. But, I'm sure that they will one day pay us back for our civility and kindness. Anyway, Daily Co's Radio now live, as we find out from somebody who actually is hundreds of miles away from the production of the show. But that's the magic of the internet. Bill tells us today, Kagro X, me, David Waldman, goes in pocket, it's true, to catch up on all the summer lawn care articles. That part's not true. He's been meaning to get to. Then, if there's time, a few words on why the country is doomed because Trump is going to get us all killed. That certainly holds true. I don't plan on deviating from that. But, if nothing else, Trump is a plan smasher. Others say he's a norm smasher. I say it's the norm to have a plan. So, I don't know. We'll continue on and see what we can do with this. Oh, look, somebody who I thought I had muted is showing up in my timeline, but I'll have to look away from that as that scrolls by. And let's jump in with, let's see. I put so many things away in Pocket. Let's begin there. The Twitter stream has plenty, but it's awfully difficult to know where to pick up on it. All right, let's see. This was an interesting thing I happened to see retweeted this morning. How about this? We all know David Atkins, and I would like to read out his tweet thread recommended to me by several others in the tweet stream. Just sort of an interesting compilation. Maybe this is a good place to start just to remind you of how crazy things are. I thought this was helpful. As Republicans construct a conspiracy theory that Adam Schiff and Hillary Clinton personally orchestrated a massive conspiracy to entrap Trump in Ukraine. That's what they're up to these days. It's worth noting just how many conspiracy theories you have to believe in just to be a standard Republican these days. It's an interesting way of putting things, but I think he's got it right. First and foremost, top of the list for David here. Number one, you have to believe that 10,000 climate scientists all around the world are either stupid or engaged in a massive criminal conspiracy to concoct bad science in order to receive more government grant funding. I'm sure that's what it's all about. And that there are no other scientists exposing it. Although I'm sure that Republicans think, oh, yes, there are. The three scientists we found, they expose it all the time. Anyway, number two, you have to believe that there is a giant conspiracy across all of news media to make Republicans look bad and elect Democrats in spite of continually unfair press coverage of candidates like Hillary Clinton in exchange for what exactly? It's never really clear. Number three, you have to believe without evidence that there is a giant conspiracy across local, state, and federal elections officials all across the country to engage in mass, wide-scale voter impersonation fraud. This would be insanely complicated, incredibly risky, and hugely inefficient. Fourth, you have to believe that there's a giant conspiracy to push migrants to the border in order to change the demographics of the U.S., in order to increase taxes and gain, quote, control. As usual, these sorts of conspiracies echo fascist anti-Semitic ones, hence Soros. There's more. 5, you have to believe that there was a deep conspiracy to elect a man named Barack Hussein Obama to the presidency in order to take away all your freedoms, and that they picked a guy named Barack Hussein Obama for the job. Or made up his birth certificate from scratch. I guess that's still out there too. Number 6, you have to believe that the deep state, quote unquote deep state, entrapped Trump with Russia entanglements before the 2016 election in order to derail his presidency if he won, but didn't use it to stop him from winning, and were blindsided when he won, but have stymied his every move afterward. Number 7, you have to believe that there is a giant unexposed conspiracy of hundreds of thousands of teachers and faculty from pre-K through higher education to indoctrinate young people. Rather than, people not buying into garbage and bigotry once they learn something. Number 8, you have to believe in a tiny group of obscenely rich industrialists who are the only truth tellers, the only ones looking out for the forgotten man, while millions of middle-class professionals and civil servants are corrupt liars. It's a twisted funhouse version of Marxist theory. It's an interesting thought. Number 9, it goes on for some time here. Number 9, you have to believe that millions of people want to disarm you to leave you defenseless against looters, burglars, and liberal fascism, which he trademarks there, of course, or acknowledges the trademark of, what's his name? Jonah Goldberg, right? Rather than just wanting their kids to not get shot at school again and again by trigger-happy Rambo cosplayers. Number 10, you'd have to believe that green energy is a scam to give connected companies money and make coal miners homeless, rather than an effort to save millions of lives from climate change, pollution, and black lung. Good reminder on the black lung there. There's an 11th. You have to believe that social services are intentionally corrupt scam to keep minority groups on the, quote, democratic plantation, also trademarked, I forget who wins for that one, rather than a good faith effort to make up for the predations of a brutal market in a society riddled with horrific structural racism. There's actually more, but they're not numbered here. I think he's just summing up here and saying it goes on, so there are more. We just didn't try and lay them out. And that's just the standard stuff you hear from most GOP politicians on any given day. It doesn't even get into the really weird stuff that millions of Republican voters actually believe, like QAnon, fifth column communists, Illuminati, etc. And I repeat, it's not just the rubes, it's the senators and the representatives. It's the president and his lawyers. It's conspiracy theory turtles all the way down. In a two-party system, it's incredibly dangerous for one party to be this far gone from reality. And that, in the end, is the end. Okay. Makes sense. Well summed up in that. I can't recall offhand whether we discussed on the air the whether or not we discussed the weird misinterpretation going on. We talked about the PC meetings mistake, but I think there's another PC meetings level mistake going on in the latest Fox News driven lunacy. I guess the next level of the next level conspiracy theory, I guess, if you will, about the impeachment proceedings. Let's see, I can't recall whether that was something that came up in the last few minutes of the show or not, but I guess one of you could remind me. Stop me if you've heard this one before, I guess. Do I have the actual article here somewhere? I must. Let's see. First, maybe the first resort should be to my own Twitter feed, because I saw it come up again this morning as Byron York, who I really dislike, quite honestly. He's not a very good reporter. And he retweeted this thing this morning, or I guess actually he retweeted it yesterday. I just didn't notice that he also had bought into this stupid idea. Yeah, here it is. It's from yesterday that he was retweeting it. Not a great look for the lawyer helping the whistleblower start the investigation that has led to impeachment proceedings. From Fox News, we have this. I had seen, who was it? Mike Huckabee retweeting this one. Huckabee's considerably dumber, I think, on the whole, than York usually is. But York, he's really a bad reporter. I see him in the middle of really dumb stuff all the time. He's just a partisan. What can you do? Anyway, this is the latest outrage. Greg Ree, R-E, is the name, with three G's in the name Greg, G-R-E-G-G, and then just two letters in his surname. So serious unbalance as between the two names, in my opinion, because that's what I like to say about things, and I'm ethnocentric in that way, I guess. Yeah, I don't know what kind of, well, okay, fine, whatever. That's his last name. It's weird because it makes me think that there should be a colon afterwards and then some information about the content of the article, but okay. Here's the article, and here's the outrage. Quote, in their scare quotes they have here, coup has started. Whistleblower's attorney said, coup has started is what he said in 2017 posts calling for impeachment. And looks like, I guess, I don't know whether it started with Hannity, but the article is illustrated with a video from Hannity's show. This is his sort of misreading, I think. The target of the outrage is Mark Zaid, the guy we're calling Zaid, the attorney, or one of the attorneys representing the intelligence community whistleblower at the center of the Democrats' ongoing impeachment inquiry, tweeted conspicuously in January 2017 that a, quote, coup has started and that impeachment will follow ultimately. Now, that's the part of the claim that's true. Those two phrases appeared in tweets apparently from Mark Zaid in January of 2017. It is, of course, not the Democrats' ongoing impeachment inquiry. It is the House of Representatives' ongoing impeachment inquiry. We just happen to have won the damn thing, and you lost it. Anyway, it says, then in July of 2017, Zaid remarked, I predict CNN will play a key role in Donald Trump not finishing out his full term as president. Okay. Also that month, Zaid tweeted, we will get rid of him and this country is strong enough to survive even him and his supporters. I mean, yeah, so what? Amid a slew of impeachment-related posts, Zaid assured his Twitter followers that, quote, as one falls, two more will take their place, apparently referring to Trump administration employees who defy the White House. Apparently, I don't know, we'll see. Zaid promised that the coup would occur in many steps. The tweets, which came shortly after President Trump fired then acting Attorney General Sally Yates for failing to defend federal laws in court, are likely to fuel Republican concerns that the anonymous whistleblower's complaint is tainted with partisanship. Trump's call with Ukraine's leader, which is the subject of the complaint, occurred in July of 2019. The whistleblower's lawyers gave away the game, the Trump campaign's communication director Tim Murtaugh told Fox News. It was always the Democrats' plan to stage a coup and impeach President Trump, impeaching him, of course, not a coup, and all they ever needed was the right scheme. They whiffed on Mueller, so now they've settled on the perfectly fine Ukraine phone call. This proves this was orchestrated from the beginning. Of course, it proves nothing of the sort. What's happening here is here's the first tweet that they're focusing on, Mark Zaid. So this is the January 2017, January 30th, 2017 tweet. And here's what I think is going on here, right? Okay, here's at the heart of it, we have to begin with the tweet that Mark Zaid is embedding in his own tweet. He is reacting to a tweet from Jake Tapper that says, POTUS fires acting AG Sally Yates for, quote, refusing to enforce a legal order designed to protect the citizens, unquote, of the U.S. Now, of course, that itself is highly questionable, but it was certainly the position of the White House that they were firing Yates for failing to, whatever it was, refusing to enforce a legal order designed to protect the citizens of the United States. Just to refresh memories here, what was going on, Tapper himself includes a press release from the White House from January 30th, 2017, statement on the appointment of Dana Boente as acting Attorney General. The acting Attorney General Sally Yates has betrayed the Department of Justice, by refusing to enforce a legal order designed to protect the citizens of the United States. This order was approved as to form and legality by the Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel, and you know they're awesome. Ms. Yates is an Obama administration appointee who is weak on borders and very weak on illegal immigration. This is an official, early on, when they were still doing this, official release from the Office of the Press Secretary. Really remarkable. It is time to get serious about protecting our country, calling for tougher vetting for individuals traveling from 7 dangerous places is not extreme. It was just rejected by most of the courts in the form that Sally Yates confronted it. She was 100% right. It is reasonable and necessary to protect our country. Tonight, President Trump relieved Ms. Yates of her duties and subsequently named Dana Boente, U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, to serve as acting Attorney General until Senator Jeff Sessions is finally confirmed by the Senate, where he is being wrongly held up by Democrat senators for strictly political reasons. This is from the guy who fired him. I am honored to serve President Trump in this role until Senator Sessions is confirmed. I will defend and enforce the laws of our country to ensure that our people and our nation are protected, said Dana Boente, acting Attorney General. So the release, ostensibly about the appointment of Dana Boente, doesn't get mentioned. Bonte's appointment is in the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph out of 5. So just thought I would throw that in there. So here's what's going on, right? He's fired Sally Yates. Tapper takes note of that. And Zaid, in discussing that, we've lost track of it now. We have to go back to the Fox article here. Says, hashtag coup has started. First of many steps. Hashtag rebellion. Hashtag impeachment will follow, ultimately. Hashtag lawyers. I mean, that's a lot of hashtags and a lot of dumb hashtags at that. So here's what I think is going on here. I mean, what they're doing is reading it at the most basic possible level. That out of context with no interest at all, as far as I can tell, that makes any sense. No reference to what's going on with Sally Yates. He says the word coup, so therefore he's starting a coup. Coup has started. What's happening, of course, is I think Zaid is saying that the coup led by Trump's forces have started. This firing of Sally Yates is the first step in the overthrow of the norms, the rule of law, the ordinary operating procedures wherein you can say from day to day with relative certainty that we're still a constitutional republic here. The coup is Trump's, not Zaid's. How is Zaid starting a coup by watching Trump appoint Dana Bonte to anything? He isn't. The coup is the improper firing of Sally Yates on trumped-up charges of refusing to obey an order to enforce an order which was ultimately rejected by the courts. So I don't know how well that holds up. But of course, Republicans are going to see what they want to see in this thing. But I put that out there and I got some pushback from, random dude, but I'm sure he thought he was scoring tremendous points. His objection was, no, what you're saying is absolute nonsense. It's impossible for Trump to stage a coup. He's the president. He's merely ordering what he wants done as the president has the prerogative to do. Of course, I mean, it's an interesting front line objection, but it takes about 2 seconds to see if you can imagine. Can I imagine a situation in which even a duly elected president who somehow got into office with 3 million fewer votes than his opponent, could that person do something which would qualify as staging a coup? Like, for instance, actually taking over the government in personality, as opposed to executing the office of president, perhaps in partisan manner, perhaps even for his own interest. A duly elected president who, say, dismisses high government officials who insist that the rule of law demands X, as opposed to Donald Trump's untrained idea about it meaning Y, right, is getting rid of, is purging the government of those people, replacing them with your own yes men so that you can, let's say, replace a constitutional republic with an absolute dictatorship, making the government and the governance of the country your personality. Would that not be a coup? Of course it would. Don't use big words that you don't understand. And coup's not that big of a word. So anyway, I just thought I would throw that alternative explanation of things out. Coup has started. In what position is Mark Zaid in to declare that a coup against Donald Trump and the Trump government has started? And in what sense would the firing of Sally Yates be a part of that coup, signal the start of that coup? You could claim that it was motivation to begin a coup, in which case you would then be waiting patiently for the first sign that the coup had begun, and a tweet isn't going to be it. Now, I think they just read this one upside down and backwards, like the PC meetings that they thought were about political correctness. Or for that matter, I guess you could hearken back to, if you want to do a both sides thing, Naomi Wolf and her book about, what was it, Death Recorded, and that's not what the book was about. You remember that mistake that she had made, and after the publication of her book, that was a wild scene. But similar, it just came to mind thinking about that and the PC meetings and the publication of that book. All right, two very interesting things. Next thing I think we ought to try and spend some time catching up on, but we won't get even most of the way through before our first break is upon us. We ought to take a look at what's going on. Well, maybe we'll just round up what we ought to take care of and then take care of it afterwards. What's happening in the Roger Stone trial? Interesting trial balloons, it is said, being sent up in New York Times and Washington Post about a possible conflict of sorts, a break, a distance opening up in between Attorney General Bill Barr and President Trump. Though interesting theory that I've seen floated out there is that maybe this is Barr trying to preserve some breathing room for himself to rehabilitate his reputation in whatever comes after the Trump administration, however it ends for him. On the other hand, it would be a lot of fun to see him on the outs and kicked out again, except I fear for who we'd get next as Attorney General. But at some point, I think it hardly even matters whether we get someone worse or not. There's a certain threshold after which worse just doesn't make any material difference, I think, unless it's, I guess if it's Stephen Miller, then I suppose things could get worse. All right. We might want to lean also on the Friday abbreviated pundit roundup from Georgia, just to get a sense of exactly where we are, it being the latest on the impeachment inquiry being the subtitle of the abbreviated pundit roundup this time. So that's probably a good starting place. I also should catch up by offering you some, a take that I thought I probably put on the table, if not absolutely promised yesterday, in terms of picking and choosing our terminology when talking about what crimes we're talking about. This is something that Greg laid the groundwork with his ABCs of impeachment, abuse, betrayal, and what was the C on that one? I can't even remember what that was, Greg. But at any rate, then you actually floated the idea that it might be better to just go with bribery on that one. So big movement on by others to get us to abandon the fancy Latin terminology of quid pro quo. Glenn Kirshner was on television doing it. Josh Marshall has done so in print, both being passed around with some frequency on Twitter, and maybe we can jump in with that when we return in 2 minutes. Be right back. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. A late return from the music there, off to get myself a writing implement. I did get my reminder, thanks very much, Scott, about finding the 1/4 of the appellate judge's tweet, and then I realized, the real reminder I needed before that was go get something to write down the reminder that Scott is going to text you later on. But I got it. We had the 2-minute break, thankfully. Time enough for that. Let's see, where did we leave off with this? I think we were in pocket and lining up. Yes, the Glenn Kirshner and Josh Marshall takes on what Greg told you several days ago, the ABCs of impeachment. And the C must have been corruption. Yes, I'm sure that was probably the case, right? Abuse, betrayal, corruption, which then became abuse, bribery, and corruption. And I think that will serve pretty well. But now the rest of the journalistic world catching up on this, though I am certain that, I don't know, maybe Greg came up with that on his own, but he was perhaps prompted to that by someone else's even earlier brilliance. It is possible. And, we give credit where due here if we can remember to do it. Otherwise, we ask people to tweet us reminders to go get somebody that credit. All right. Where do we start? Well, as we said, we'll first say Greg told you here. You heard it here first that you ought to be thinking less about quid pro quo, if at all about quid pro quo, and more about abuse, betrayal / bribery, and corruption. And let's see. Maybe what I'll do is, this is a rather longer video excerpt than I usually play on the air. Pardon me. Again, I'm having a hell of a morning here. But Glenn Kirshner is where? I think I can look at the write-up. Actually, I've got a write-up on it in Crooks and Liars from Eliza Worthington. Eliza? How did she say? A-L-I-Z-A. Sorry, Ms. Worthington. Sorry about not knowing whether it's Eliza or Eliza. Glenn Kirshner, don't call it quid pro quo when it's extortion and bribery. Quid pro quo is for small potato non-criminal enterprises. On Stephanie Rule's show, now we know where it came from, Kirshner argues the fate of entire countries hung in the balance. Okay, that's sort of a weird follow-up to that, but okay, here we go. Runs about a minute and a half if you actually play through the whole thing, but I thought he really put it well. I could read you the text of it, but maybe MSNBC won't come and sue us or make us take down the podcast if I say really nice things about them or play it in parts or something like that. Anyway, it's a panel discussion, as always, on one of these shows, Stephanie Rule's show. I think some of you are probably familiar with it. I don't get to watch it, but every once in a while I see clips from it like anything else. MSNBC program. Let's run a little bit of it because I think he does a really good job of laying it out. Oh, and before I even do that, I should read down a little bit in the Crooks and Liars write-up of it because there's another person that deserves some credit for this too. The body of the article begins, let's call a thing, shall we? Yesterday, our intrepid managing editor, Karoli Kunz, you know her, probably without the surname as Twitter Karoli, K-A-R-O-L-I, and most Twitter handles never pronounced out loud like that, so I'm not certain I've got her name correct either, and we've known her for years, right? Anyway, she says, please start using this word. Also, bribery. That is true. Extortion is the other word that she's talking about here. This is a tweet she embeds from John Storrs' Twitter account here. There's a better word to describe holding millions of paychecks hostage for his personal benefit. I guess talking about the the government shutdown. It's not quid pro quo, it's extortion. She says, please start using this word. Also, bribery. This very morning on Stephanie Rule's show, this very morning being, I guess, yesterday, Glenn Kirshner joined the chorus when Rule asked him about doing away with the term quid pro quo when referring to the criminality of what the Trump administration pulled in Ukraine. Specifically, she asked if that term helped the American people understand what went on there. Kirshner's response was fire, as the kids say today. Let me roll at least a little bit of it.
You got some guy presuming something.
Okay, Glenn, the phrase quid pro quo keeps getting thrown around here. Does that help the American people understand it, or is it about attempted bribery here?
Yeah, no, the quid pro quo is a quaint and confusing little Latin term that I think we should completely move away from. We have two things here. We have bribery and we have extortion. Bribery, Steph, is nothing more than giving a public official money or some kind of an inducement to take an official act. That's what Trump did. He told Zelensky, I am withholding this aid. That's an inducement. You can bribe somebody by withholding something they have a right to.
All right, I'll pause it right there just so we can break things up a little bit and maybe somehow escape the searching algorithms that would otherwise give us notice that we're violating the copyright at NBC. But that's a good point that's been made there. Right at the beginning, you can ignore that. That's end of a Lindsey Graham clip before Stephanie poses the question to Kirshner. Kirshner, I guess for purposes of being clear about this, is identified by the Chiron on the screen, if you don't know who he is or follow him on Twitter or anything like that, as a former federal prosecutor. So, great point what he's been making here. This is bribery and extortion. The extortion part was clearer to me, the idea that, unless you give us this, start this investigation, we won't protect you. We won't help you fend off the Russians. Bribery seemed a little bit more difficult for me to pinpoint here, but it does make a certain amount of sense, and he describes it in a certain way and how it's essentially the same side, the two sides of the same coin. it's actually probably pretty difficult to have one without the other in a case like this. But excellent point to begin with, that the inducement idea, that withholding the aid and offering a way to get the aid unwithheld, turned over as it was originally supposed to be, is offered up. That's the inducement. And as he says, you can bribe somebody by withholding something they have a right to. That's true, right? So that makes the bribery a lot easier to understand. Of course, I imagine that Trump supporters and Republicans everywhere will say, how could it be bribery if it was money that they were entitled to? And eventually he turned it over. Of course, I have my doubts about whether or not he turned it over. But an excellent point made there, and excellent points to come. We can play a little bit more of this before we have to worry about how much of the clip we get to roll at one time. Let's continue.
And he told Zelensky, I'm withholding this aid until you announce your dirty investigation into Biden. That's bribery. Extortion is, let's take the stereotypical example. I will burn your house down if you don't give me money. What did Trump do? He basically said, I will let Russia burn your country down by withholding this military aid unless you announce a dirty investigation into Biden.
All right.
Okay,
So excellent point there. Oops, we've lost our place in this. I think it came right about here. I don't know why it went back to the beginning. Let me try this again.
By withholding this military aid unless you announce a dirty investigation into Biden.
Okay. Now we can pause that there. I think that explains the bribery, extortion flip side pretty well. And then he'll finally wrap this up with one more attempt at showing how they're the two sides of the same coin here.
You know, often when somebody commits a criminal act, Steph, it violates multiple statutes. This does, both bribery and extortion. But we know bribery is one of the big four in the Constitution. Treason, bribery, high crimes, misdemeanors. Let's go with bribery because it is that.
Okay, I think
door
that
number three.
makes the point pretty well, right? And a good point at the end here. That is one of the four big crimes actually named in the Constitution. Well, two crimes named in the Constitution, and then two general categories, high crimes and misdemeanors. No one knows what that means. But I thought a great summing up in video, and therefore for us, audio form. If you prefer it in written form, it was then offered up next by Josh Marshall, who offered his take in a piece called Some Thoughts on Describing the President's Crimes. And guess what? They're pretty much the same thoughts, but I thought I'd give him credit for them. Here are some basic thoughts. He just starts right in about what happened in this story, what matters, and how to describe it. The president used extortion. What do you know? To cheat in the 2020 presidential election. He used military aid dollars meant to aid an ally against his Russian patrons, good point, in order to force Ukraine to intervene in the 2020 elections in order to remain in office by corrupt means. There are various crimes that get committed along the way, but that is the core of it. The president is delegated vast powers to act in the national interest, and he has vast discretion to determine what he or she believes the national interest is. That's one of our big problems here. Provides a lot of cover for them. But when he uses those powers for his own personal or financial gain, they are illegitimate on their face, abuses of power, and merit impeachment. The fact that he was doing so to sabotage a national election makes it vastly worse. And the fact that he was getting a foreign power to sabotage a U.S. election makes it worse still. Any talk of quid pro quos and this and that minutia is a distortion of what happened. Quid pro quos are simply exchanges of one thing for another. And, of course, I think they hung up on that not only because it's a confusing and lesser-known term, I think, lesser-known than extortion and bribery anyway, but because people have perhaps some people have no inherent sense of what it means, it is something they think they can define away. Well, a quid pro quo is an exchange of one thing for another, and we didn't end up giving that one thing, or we didn't withhold that one thing, or we didn't get the other thing that we were asking for, and so therefore it can't be a quid pro quo. But of course, You don't actually need to complete the quid pro quo for there to be a violation of law, because, of course, there is no anti-quid pro quo law. All of the laws that we're talking about say, well, you might begin by looking for a quid pro quo or a proposed or attempted quid pro quo. I think we're all familiar with the idea of being arrested and tried for attempted felonies of all sorts. But they thought they would hang their hat on quid pro quo and then prove that there couldn't be one because childish misreading, just like PC meetings and coups beginning. So, I think they're susceptible to that. I think we've shown that. Maybe that's our theme for the morning. Anyway, where were we with this? Any talk of quid pro quos and this and that minutia is a distortion of what happened, right? Quid pro quo simply an exchange of one thing for another. Presidents will ask for help on one bill in exchange for another. The Republicans immediately said, this is how we do foreign policy, or anything for that matter, all the time. We always say, well, you help us with this and we'll help you with that. That's true. It just has to be an exchange of a public good for a public good, not a public good for private benefit, as Josh no doubt explains in the next sentence. Presidents ask for help on one bill in exchange for another. They'll condition one kind of aid to a country on assistance on another foreign policy goal. In itself, it means nothing. The crimes are bribery and extortion. The abuses of power are using presidential power for personal gain, and the central offense against the state is the attempt to sabotage a national election, the event on which the legitimacy of the entire system rests. That also a good point, a nice reminder there. Presidents do have broad discretion to determine how to act. They have broad discretion in how to determine what the national interest is. That broad discretion is granted to them on the assumption that they have in fact been, quote unquote, as the Republicans like to say, duly elected as president of the United States. If the election itself is suspect and illegitimate, then it's awfully difficult to justify giving those vast powers over without exceptional scrutiny at every turn of what the president is, what he's doing and how he's exercising his discretion. We're not even sure you're entitled to this discretion, and we're even less sure that you're using it wisely. It's pretty obvious on its face that the president did these things for his own personal interest rather than the national interest, but even this isn't left to accusations or logic or surmise. His chief co-conspirator has said repeatedly that all his actions were done exclusively in the interest of Donald Trump. That's Rudy Kaludi. Rudy Giuliani reiterated the point as recently as last night, tweeting, as herein embedded, "The investigation I conducted concerning the 2016 Ukrainian collusion and corruption was done solely as a defense attorney to defend my client against false charges that kept changing as one after another were disproven." That's the Rudy Kaludi claim here. But the important part for our purposes is that the investigation was done solely as a defense attorney to defend my client. We don't even need to get into the other crimes involved, Josh continues. Having a crooked lawyer taking over U.S. foreign policy in a critical part of the world and sidelining professional diplomats. We just focus on the core thing. The president is given tremendous power to advance the national interest, see that the laws are enforced, preserve the national welfare. These aren't powers that he owns personally. As I say, they're not his personal tea. They are delegated for these ends. Your banker has great power to act on your behalf. They have no right to steal your money. A doctor has vast powers to cut your body, make decisions when you're unconscious. They have no right to kill you or sell your organs or fondle you for their personal satisfaction, as Jim Jordan lets them do. It's all the same thing. Stop saying quid pro quo or getting lost in the details. The crimes are clear. Use language that accurately describes them. Well, I'm in agreement, and we have been. So not very difficult for us to adapt to the Josh Marshall standards on these things. Now, somewhere along the way in rereading this, I was thinking, oh, yes, there was one other item that of interest that flew by this morning on Twitter. And I think it was Brian Beutler who made the point, which should surprise no one. But I guess the idea of, what was it exactly that prompted me to think of this? It was Josh's line about, I think up here, right, that the president did these things for his own personal interest rather than the national interest. Interesting, sort of, in how stupid it was. Interesting comment from Ivanka Trump, of all people, and interesting comment from Brian on this one. Let's see. We've got Maggie Haberman tweeting Ivanka's sentiments here in the form of an AP story that I guess she's spotted. And she pulls this quote out of it. Ivanka Trump said the Bidens had, quote, created wealth as a derivative, unquote. That's a fancy word. Created wealth as a derivative of public service, while her family has made its money in business, had made its money in business before her father became president. Now, they did make some money. This much is, well, it's claimed. It's clearly claimed that they made money. We don't know how or whether it was legitimate or how much. And they're very unclear about all of that. But this is the claim. They made their money not as a derivative of public service, but in private business. But of course, Brian asking, well, was she holding a clutch that the Chinese government had given her a patent for when she said it? I guess is the big question. Wouldn't be a patent, I guess, so much as, is it a trademark? Right? Yeah, trademark rather than patent, I would assume. I don't think there's anything patentable about the clutch purses or whatever it was that she was selling in China. But I mean, she's uniquely unsuited to make this comment. I don't think it surprises anybody, and the same sort of thing probably came to mind for everybody else. Is there anything of substance in this article? I wonder. This is an AP piece by Darlene Superville here. Ivanka Trump, whistleblower's motives more important than ID. I don't know whether that's a legitimate position to take, but certainly she's a poor spokesperson for it. I will keep that open and keep it on hand so that we can all have a look at that one. And I guess I should mark this tweet here so that we can be sure we've got it for the roundup later on. All right, back into Pocket and all the other fun things that I've been saving for discussion. Flip back a page or two and get back to it. Let's see. Yes, perhaps would be wise at this point to thumb through Georgia Logothetis' abbreviated pundit roundup from the morning and see if that gives us some notes on where we ought to fill in blanks and keeps us up to speed. We begin the impeachment inquiry with the man who, aside from Donald Trump, appears central to the misconduct that's being covered under oath, Attorney General William Barr. Here's Dana Milbank, the Dick Whisperer. Dana Milbank's analysis of the Washington Post, in the Washington Post. As Trump's impeachment looms, Barr has degraded the office Elliot Richardson once dignified. Barr has turned the Justice Department into a shield for presidential misconduct and a sword wielded against the political opponents. Now, as part of the distancing campaign, see, he sees it too, I guess. Barr's Justice Department would have us believe that the Attorney General never discussed with Trump the prospective Ukraine probe into the Bidens, didn't talk to Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani about Ukraine, and didn't know anything about the White House withholding aid to Ukraine. Why would anybody doubt the sincerity of such claims? Good question. Next item here, Adam Gopnik in The New Yorker asks why Trump is obsessed with outing the whistleblower. Key part here, according to Georgia, the whistleblower is the one who is acting in the prescribed lawful way. The president and his henchmen are the ones, no surprise here, calling on the media to violate the point and purpose of the law. At an election eve rally on Monday night in Lexington, Kentucky, where Trump and Senator Rand Paul were stumping for Matt Bevin, the Republican governor, Paul said, referring to the whistleblower. Okay. I've screwed up the reading of that, but stumping for Matt Bevin, the Republican governor, Paul said, referring to the whistleblower, I say tonight to the media, do your job and print his name. The next night, Bevin's Democratic opponent, Andy Beshear, declared victory. On Wednesday, Donald Trump Jr., following a story posted by Breitbart, heedlessly tweeted the whistleblower's possible identity. Again, as we spoke about the other day, how do you solve a problem like Jr.? There's a remarkable lack, well, now we know, a remarkable lack of formal rules and precedent about what to do with the relatively adult child of the President of the United States acting as a political free agent of sorts. I mean, I guess ostensible free agent. I can't control him. He's an adult and he doesn't work for government. I can't bring government sanction down on him for revealing the name of the whistleblower. The sanctions, apparently, I have seen people say that the sanctions are reserved for government employees revealing the name. And if that's the case, I suppose you have that difficulty. Although it is interesting that the political work being done here by the kid who's supposedly running the firewalled blind trust of the Trump organization for his father while his dad is in office, and having, I guess, his connection, or rather his disconnect from government, was supposed to be substantial enough that we were supposed to, no one ever did, but supposed to buy into the legitimacy of his running the Trump organization while dad looked the other way and took care of the business of government. I think that's an interesting mix of things. And again, not much that can really be done here because there's not much in our legal code about how to deal with this, because we just never thought this was going to happen. I know we're all tired of the imagine if Obama or any other president or any Democrat had done this game, but it is kind of, I mean, can you imagine either of the Obama daughters making these kind of comments about ambassadors currently in service overseas, or revealing the names of whistleblowers, or for that matter, I guess, outing CIA agents, as was the case in the Valerie Plame thing? Can you imagine that being outsourced to Jenna Bush and then saying it was okay? No. But whatever, norms smashed. Let's see. Next item here, the Washington Post pens an editorial saying outing the whistleblower would set a dangerous precedent. That's not hard to imagine, but perhaps we can see whether they've made a well-encapsulated point here. Georgia thinks so. When accountability fails on, or politicians confuse their own interests with the public's, there we go, there must be a way for officials to raise the alarm without fear of retaliation. Hence the long-standing bipartisan agreement that whistleblowers should be given formal and informal protections. Now that a president is being called out for egregious behavior and calling his party to rally to him, that consensus is in danger. The next time a patriotic civil servant witnesses misconduct, the craven campaign against today's whistleblower may affect whether that misconduct is reported. If it is not, the public will be poorer for it. Well, that's the basic premise of whistleblower protection laws. Aptly stated. Meanwhile, Tom Dickinson in Rolling Stone looks at the latest developments in the Roger Stone trial. That one I have set aside, along with I think it's the same article, as a matter of fact. But let's get the update on this in blurb form. On day one of the trial, the prosecutors dropped a bombshell, presenting call records showing that Trump and Stone spoke on the phone regularly as the WikiLeaks email dump saga evolved, including on the day the DNC announced that it had been hacked. Federal prosecutor Aaron Zelinsky, no relation, I assume, to Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine, stopped short of arguing Trump directed Stone's activity, but the government alleged Stone's criminal cover-up was perpetrated on behalf of the now president. Evidence will show. The evidence is going to show, if he had the accent, right? Roger Stone lied to the House Intelligence Committee because the truth looked bad, Zelensky told jurors. The truth looked bad for the Trump campaign, and the truth looked bad for Donald Trump. Doing it all for Donald here. Matt Steib analyzes Jeff Sessions, who getting set to jump back in to a race for Alabama senator as well. This too in New York Magazine analyzes Jeff Sessions and his unwavering, believe it or not, fealty to Trump. Though Sessions' Senate bid had been expected for weeks, its format was not. An awkward video for an executive audience of one, all but begging for his squiggly endorsement. For Sessions, catering to the president's bottomless need to be complimented and forgetting about all the insults Trump lobbed at him, mocking his accent, as I sometimes do, calling him a dumb Southerner, and calling his appointment to Attorney General his biggest mistake. It'll all be worth it if Trump tells Alabama Republicans that he's the man to unseat Doug Jones, the most vulnerable incumbent in the 2020 Senate races. And I don't doubt that there's a possibility that Trump might do it. He's just craven enough to say, oh, no, he's a great guy. Because, I mean, how many times has he reversed himself on all of them? On a final note, Georgia sums up, here's a powerful op-ed by veteran Alan Pitts, this in USA Today, calling on Congress to stand up and defend democracy and announcing the formation of a new nonpartisan group to do the same. Well, that'll solve it. Another nonpartisan group. Okay, well, we might as well put them on the record here. Our president attempted to use his office to coerce a foreign government for help in his political campaign and put our national security at risk by withholding nearly $400 million in military aid that Congress, a co-equal branch of government, has already approved on a broad bipartisan basis. You all know what we're talking about there, Ukraine. Okay. Now, the same members of Congress who approved that funding say it's okay for President Donald Trump to make that aid contingent on help for his campaign. How is that loyalty to your country? It isn't, of course. Our members of Congress swore the same oath we did and have the same duty to protect what our veterans have put their lives on the line to protect for 243 years. Flighty rhetoric. Ready? Our Constitution and our democracy, not politics. We've done our part. Now it's time that our elected representatives find the courage to do theirs. Well, that won't change much, but it's nice rhetoric. Not going to convince anybody, I'm sure, but it's as fine a way to end up the roundup as any. We'll be right back in 1 minute with more after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. I was reminded as we went out to the break on this one, as we were talking about in the USA Today editorial about the responsibility that members of Congress have to their oaths of office. And I was reminded of, another in a string of incidents. Yesterday, Lindsey Graham, I guess, talking to the press, or I suppose this was actually would have been Wednesday, speaking to the press. I just happened to see it on Thursday. Let's see. There's the ABC News clip of him here. How long is that clip? I don't suppose I actually have to play the thing all the way through. But it is ABC News talking to Lindsey Graham. The highlight of the comments is Graham saying that he is simply not going to be reading the transcripts coming out of the depositions on the House side. I'm not going to read those transcripts, Graham said. The whole process is a joke. I'm not going to legitimize it. So I'm going to play this thing through. I don't think we'll just actually play his... Should we play his voice? Doing all this, I mean, about 40 seconds or so. That would mean I would need to transfer it to the other computer. Well, maybe I can get it turned up volume-wise here and play it off of this computer. Why not? We'll take a look. I'll listen to what he has to say here.
I heard something yesterday I could not believe. Former impeachment manager Lindsey Graham says he's not going to read the impeachment transcripts. Really?
I'm not going to read these transcripts. The whole process is a joke.
It's not all that clear, the audio, to be honest with you here, but I don't know who the questioner is. But I guess basically what I ought to do is I could read you the subtitles. And the fact that there's subtitles on this clip, I guess, tells you all you need to know about the audio quality there. Sorry about that. So the questioner says, I heard something yesterday I could not believe. Former impeachment manager Lindsey Graham says he's not going to read the impeachment transcripts. Really? And then he gives us the juicy quote. I'm not going to read these transcripts. The whole process is a joke. There's a bit more here. The whole idea that there's a quid pro quo, interesting that he goes to that, based on somebody changing... Gotta wait for the script here. Changing their testimony, presuming there was. Volker said there was not. But Volker, too, has changed his testimony, of course. He's the special envoy. You just picked things you like. I don't even know whether there really needs to be you all hate this guy. You want to get him impeached. It's more complaining from Graham. But I guess the juicy part here is he says, I'm not going to read the transcripts. Now, I just wanted to point out, speaking of violation of oaths of office by members of Congress, there is, in fact, going to be, once they get to the impeachment trial phase, senators, I don't know, does anybody remember this? It's a small, formal part of what you may have seen on television in the Clinton impeachment trial. But senators and, in this case, the Chief Justice, the presiding officer here, are administered a specific and different, oath when they're sitting as jurors or as presiding officers, in the case of the Chief Justice, in an impeachment trial. You get sworn in like a jury would in a criminal trial. So there is actually another oath, and even if for some reason, if it wasn't enough for you that Graham is in violation of his own oath to preserve, protect, defend, etc., the Constitution and the United States, etc., and I'm not doing it because partisan reasons, but there's an additional oath about trying the case impartially. And I guess it's not necessarily a facial violation. I suppose you could stand there and say, yes, impartiality demands that I not read the evidence being presented because it's a joke and a mockery of the process. Now, it's not usually going to fly. It's an awfully difficult argument to make. Certainly, Trump's forces will agree with it anyway. But anyway, I just thought I'd point that out. Maybe when the time comes, a Democratic senator ought to make the motion. It will, of course, be defeated if they hold the impeachment trial in the current Senate. And I don't know that there's any reason why they should. I know that for whatever reason, Democratic strategists are on the Hill, I think, attempting to wrap things up and hold the impeachment trial before the end of the year. Why that should happen, I have no idea. I think you should drag it out for as long as possible. Quite frankly, they should drag it out through the election in the off chance that Trump actually wins. Then it's possible that you might even have a Democratic Senate that would be closer to being able to remove him, but probably not a 2/3 Democratic Senate. So maybe better to try and excise the cancer before he faces the prospect of re-election. But anyway, we may have to ask, a Democratic senator might have to make a motion that Graham be asked to stand aside from taking the oath as a juror on the trial, given what he has said on the record. And, it would be defeated. Republicans would just vote in a party line vote to table that motion. Or even if he admitted that it was the truth, that I simply refuse to be impartial as a juror, they would simply waive that by majority vote and have him take the oath. But just in case you were wondering about that, it is true. They do take a separate oath. They'll be asked by I don't know who does it. I guess the secretary, is it the Secretary of the Senate administering the oath? And they'll be asked, do you solemnly swear that in all things appertaining to the trial of the impeachment of, and there they'll include Donald John Trump, President of the United States, now pending. In other words, do you solemnly swear that in all things appertaining to the trial of the impeachment of Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, now pending, you will do impartial justice according to the Constitution and laws, so help you God? I do. We do. Whatever it is that they might answer. Or they may. I don't even recall whether they have them recite the thing as I do solemnly swear. Typically in swearings in, they do it that way. Do you solemnly swear? We do. I do. They'll all say. But yeah, really no reason why he should be allowed to stand there and take that oath, without it having noted on the record before things begin that he has said that in his mind there's no fairness whatsoever to the process. The whole thing's a joke, and I refuse to read the transcripts. I'm going to act as a juror without reading the evidence entered in this trial. And I guess it won't make a difference, but I wouldn't mind having it as part of the record. I think that would be helpful. All right, let's dive into a few of the other things that I have put aside in Pocket. There are a couple of things that I saw crop up in my scrolling through the Twitter thread that might be of value going along as well. Maybe I should check that before heading into the Pocket stuff. I don't know. We'll dive back into it later. Pocket. We'll take care of some of the longer form stuff first, perhaps. All right, let's see. There's the Stone trial, which, as I mentioned, I had coverage somewhere from Rolling Stone, but there's also some interesting coverage from the New York Times. It's not going well, quite honestly. It looks like Stone could be in some serious trouble here. How long does the New York Times piece run? Thought we'd get up to speed on some of these details. Stone trial links Trump more closely to 2016 effort to obtain stolen emails. So it's not only getting bad for Stone, he's in trouble, but as expected, the trial is putting on display more accusations that, yes, right at the time when Republicans are doing everything they can to say, all right, there might have been a quid pro quo, but that's okay. And even so, we have no proof that Trump knew anything about it. We have no proof that Trump did any of these things. The Stone trial is proving that not only is there proof that he did know about it, but there's more proof that he was more closely involved in it than we had even had or assumed to date. Newly revealed calls between President Trump and Roger Stone dovetailed with key developments in the theft of Democratic emails, prosecutors said. Same gist of the item that Georgia cited from the Rolling Stone article. Sharon Lafreniere is our writer on this one. Hope I have that name correct. President Trump was more personally involved in his campaign's efforts to obtain Democratic emails stolen by Russian operatives in 2016 than was previously known. Phone records introduced in federal court on Wednesday suggested. Federal prosecutors disclosed the calls at the start of the criminal trial of Roger J. Stone Jr. Everyone's a junior. Mr. Trump's longtime friend, who faces charges of lying to federal investigators about his efforts to contact WikiLeaks during the campaign. Russian intelligence officers had funneled tens of thousands of emails they stole from Democratic computers to WikiLeaks, which released them at critical points during the presidential race. The records suggest that Mr. Trump spoke to Mr. Stone repeatedly during the summer of 2016, at a time when Stone was aggressively seeking to obtain the stolen emails from Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. The prosecutors noted that they did not know what Stone and Trump had discussed, but they stressed that the timing of the calls dovetailed with other key developments related to the theft and release of the Democratic emails. The phone records are the first concrete suggestion that Mr. Trump may have had a direct role in his campaign's effort to benefit from Russia's hidden hand in the election. At the very least, the calls and other evidence underscored the eagerness of senior campaign officials and other Trump associates to reap the rewards of what the special counsel, Mueller, later called a sophisticated and alarming covert Russian influence operation. And the disclosures came amid the impeachment inquiry into Trump's efforts to pressure a different foreign government, Ukraine, to potentially interfere in the 2020 election, again in ways that would personally benefit him. Mueller scrutinized the links between WikiLeaks and the Trump campaign during his investigation, but the phone calls between Trump and Stone were not described in the version of Mueller's report that was publicly released last spring, most likely because officials redacted evidence relating to continuing criminal investigations and prosecutions, including the case against Stone. Stone's contacts with Trump are an issue in his criminal case because he's accused of lying about his discussions with Trump campaign officials about WikiLeaks, among other charges. Stone, a former campaign aide and 40-year friend of the president, has acknowledged trying in 2016 to contact Assange for information damaging to Hillary Clinton, but he has denied any knowledge of Russia's role in the theft of emails and has said he never managed to reach Assange, though he continually bragged that he had a back channel to him. Stone, 67, is charged with 7 felonies, including obstructing justice, making false statements, and tampering with a witness. The case revolves mainly around his testimony to the House Intelligence Committee in September of 2017, when it was investigating Russian interference in the 2016 election. That would be to the Republican-controlled version of the committee. In his opening statement in a federal courtroom in Washington, Bruce S. Rogow, R-O-G-O-W, that's Stone's defense lawyer, said his client never acted with criminal intent. Far from trying to deceive congressional investigators, he said, Stone voluntarily testified before the House committee and sought to give his deposition publicly, which is an easier thing to do to a Republican panel. Let's see if he would do it now. But Aaron Zelinsky, the lead prosecutor who also served on Mueller's team, said Stone deliberately lied to the congressional investigators because the truth looked bad for the Trump campaign and the truth looked bad for Donald Trump. He said Stone, a self-described dirty trickster, went to extreme lengths to cover up his lies to the committee, including threatening another potential witness named Randy Credico. Remember when his name used to come up? As well as Credico's friend and even Mr. Credico's dog. Stone also concealed hundreds of text messages and email exchanges that would have exposed his efforts to contact Assange and relay information to senior Trump officials, prosecutors said. They set out a detailed timeline showing how Stone's interactions with Trump and his campaign officials overlapped with developments involving the Russian hackers or WikiLeaks. On June 14, 2016, the same day the Washington Post reported that Russian hackers had infiltrated the computer network of the DNC, the records reflect 3 calls between Trump and Stone. Stone placed a very brief call to Trump's home phone that evening, followed by 2 calls from Trump's cell phone to Stone's cell phone, conversations that lasted a total of about 5 minutes. Over the next 2 weeks, Guccifer 2.0, remember him, the pseudonym used by the Russian hackers, posted 2 messages on WordPress. The first claimed credit for the computer espionage. The second praised Trump. That same day, prosecutors said Stone made a call from his cell phone to Trump's cell phone that lasted about 2.5 minutes. Stone was in contact with Guccifer 2.0, but has said he did not know who was behind that persona. On July 31st, after a 5-minute phone call from Trump's home phone line, Stone wrote a message directing an associate to see Assange. At the time, Assange was holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London trying to avoid prosecution. In August, Stone wrote to Paul Manafort, then the Trump campaign chairman, saying that he had an idea to save Mr. Trump, but, quote, it ain't pretty. Manafort and Stone, of course, former consulting partners for many years. That same month, Stone wrote on Twitter, "Trust me, it will soon be Podesta's time in the barrel." Everyone remembers that. That prediction seemed remarkably prescient because about 6 weeks later, WikiLeaks began releasing 50,000 emails that Russian agents had stolen from the computer of John Podesta, Mrs. Clinton's campaign chairman. Stone told the House committee that his Twitter message was based on research from a friend about the business dealings of Podesta and his brother in Ukraine. The friend, Jerome Corsi, initially backed up Stone's account, but in interviews with the investigator, he said that was merely a cover story that he and Mr. Stone devised. Zelensky, the prosecutor, said Stone lied to congressional investigators about his interactions with Corsi. He said Stone also told Credico not to cooperate with Mueller's investigation. In a January 2018 text message, Stone described the special counsel's investigation as, quote, a waste of your time, then referred to Mueller with an expletive, just for fun, I guess. Mr. Zelensky suggested Credico, the New York radio host who struggles with alcohol, might strike jurors as a less than perfect witness. But to an amazing degree, he said, the evidence against Stone is laid bare in documents. Stephen Bannon, who ran the Trump campaign in its final months and then became a top White House advisor, is also expected to testify in the trial. So that should be pretty interesting, and we'll keep an eye out for that and reports of how that went. You know that he thinks he's smarter than everybody else in the room. We'll see how that pans out for him on the witness stand. Okay, let's see. Other interesting items for the day that might just do us good here. Let's see. Let's catch up a little bit on the John Bolton situation. I grabbed this tweet the other day from Emma Loop, political reporter at BuzzFeed News covering the investigations, who noted that John Bolton's legal team has told House Intelligence Committee that Bolton will take them to court if he is subpoenaed. So that's an interesting new twist from the other day. That, according to a committee official, the White House instruction that he not appear will add to the evidence of the president's obstruction of Congress, responds the committee. Their statement: we would welcome John Bolton's deposition, and he did not appear as he was requested today. His counsel has informed us that unlike 3 other dedicated public servants who worked for him on the NSC and have complied with lawful subpoenas, Mr. Bolton would take us to court if we subpoenaed him. A reversal of what we thought was his earlier position, but maybe he was never explicit about it. We regret Mr. Bolton's decision not to appear voluntarily, but we have no interest in allowing the administration to play rope-a-dope with us in the courts for months. This is interesting and helps us understand perhaps the decision to drop the subpoena for Kupperman as well. We have no interest in allowing the administration to play rope-a-dope with us in the courts for months. Rather, the White House instruction that he not appear will add to the evidence of the president's obstruction of Congress. So there you have it. Kind of an interesting approach to things. All right. Well, we're not going to get Bolton's voluntary cooperation. He says he won't comply with a subpoena. We could subpoena him and allow him to take us to court and fight that out, along with we could have opted to continue to fight the Kupperman subpoena as well. But I think, as I recall, I had read somewhere, and I'm sure somewhere in Pocket is some more explanation of it. Yes, here is some. As a matter of fact, I've got Josh Gerstein's tweet from the other day laying out the story. New: the House pulls subpoena to ex-Trump Deputy National Security Advisor Charles Kupperman in an apparent bid to head off a ruling from Judge Leon and leave the McGahn case, the Don McGahn case, as the vehicle for the issue, according to Politico reporting from Kyle Cheney. I also happen to note there was a tweet from Lawrence Tribe, always a good idea to check in with what he might be thinking on this. Judge Leon should have dismissed this suit versus both the House and Trump as meritless. This is I guess, or maybe we should start a little further down here, but he's referring to his own tweet of November 1st here, saying, I guess, speaking about the McGahn case and the Kupperman case, the conflict between complying with a clearly lawful subpoena from Congress, Tribe writes, and following a clearly lawless order from the president shouldn't take long to resolve. The judge should have ruled from the bench instead of dragging this out until December. This is, I guess, the origin of, or similar anyway, to the origin of my thoughts on Judge Leon possibly delaying these things for less than sterling reasons here. This is in reference to the Washington Post's reporting that John Bolton's former deputy, Kupperman, asks judge to resolve conflicting demands for House impeachment testimony. So we knew at that point that Kupperman was suing. Bolton at that point was not suing. Tribe is saying, the judge should rule from the bench. It's a pretty clear question whether there's a real conflict, and if so, how to resolve it, as between a lawful subpoena from Congress and a lawless order from the president not to comply with it. But instead, the judge said, well, we will go to trial on this one, but not until December. So interesting. Also, the picture illustrating the Post piece that's embedded in the tweet is a picture of, I think that's Don McGahn. If you go to the story itself, they use a headline photo of John Bolton and all this. But so Tribe, having said this, then tweets a few days later that Judge Leon should have dismissed the suit, which he didn't. This is an interesting twist too, right? So the House drops the subpoena for Kupperman. Kupperman had been suing for a resolution of this, as he says, irreconcilable conundrum here. Do I comply with the subpoena or with the orders of the president? The subpoena gets dropped, but interesting, for whatever reason, Judge Leon, however he says it, has not dismissed the case. The parties to the case, I think, both said that dropping the subpoena mooted the case, and they really should get rid of it, just dismiss it at this point. But the judge hasn't done that, and I'm not certain why that is the case or what he thinks he's going to do with this thing. So Lawrence Tribe writes, Judge Leon should have dismissed this suit versus both the House and Trump as meritless. By deferring a hearing to December 10th, he may leave Adam Schiff no choice but to pull the subpoena, I guess he did, and moot the case rather than let endless litigation block this impeachment. So that's interesting. I guess that's a different view of things. And here he immediately refers to something from Courthouse News. I guess I've misunderstood the chronology here. I guess he defers the hearing to December 10th before the subpoena is dropped, that leaving Schiff no choice but to pull the subpoena, which he did do, and moot the case. But then I'm fairly certain I read elsewhere that the judge hasn't bothered to dismiss the case even after the subpoena was pulled. But maybe I just confused that issue by misreading the Tribe tweet initially. I think the Courthouse News article is just going to tell us, all right, that's just a link to the Cooperman filings and all of this. All right, well, let's see. Before that, there's the Lawrence Tribe tweet. And this was going to go somewhere else. All right, so I can get rid of that. I got to run down the chronology of all this and see if I can figure out exactly what's going on here. The Josh Gerstein tweet in all of this. All right, it was leading to the Kyle Cheney article, and maybe that clear things up. This is the news that the House has withdrawn the subpoena for Cooperman. And let's see. So the move suggests that Democrats intend to move forward with impeachment proceedings. Yes, here was the explanation for why they pulled it. Just it doesn't clear up what Judge Leon is actually doing with the case, if I have that right or not. The move suggests that Democrats intend to move forward with impeachment proceedings. That clearly is true. Even without securing testimony from Bolton, who was a central witness to events underlying allegations that Trump pressured Ukraine to investigate Biden. Bolton and the aide in question, Charles Cooperman, share the same attorneys. The House's impeachment inquiry will not countenance further efforts by witnesses or the White House to delay or otherwise obstruct the committee's vital investigatory work. The three lawmakers leading the inquiry wrote in a letter to Cooperman and Bolton's lawyers. Rather than attempt to enforce the subpoena, Schiff and other lawmakers urged Cooperman to voluntarily comply. They said he and his lawyers should, at a minimum, abide by an impending decision in a court case that involved former White House counsel Don McGahn, who has resisted a House subpoena to testify by claiming that he is, quote, absolutely immune from congressional demands because of his proximity to Trump. The White House has claimed that Cooperman, too, is absolutely immune from testifying in the impeachment inquiry. House lawyers indicated that they expected Cooperman and his lawyers to respond to the withdrawal of the subpoena imminently and urged him to dismiss his demands for a judge to weigh in on the House's demand for his testimony. That issue for the Democrats is the tight time frame that Democrats envision for the impeachment process, which top lawmakers have hoped would be completed before the end of the year. The judge in the Cooperman matter, Richard Leon, has agreed to an expedited schedule, counter to what I had said about him delaying it. I don't know if December 10th is all that expedited, though, but one that would still probably stretch deep into December or even January. So we'll keep an eye on things and see if we can't figure out whether or not the case did get dismissed or didn't. A couple of other comments on the issues here. Karen telling us it looks like Bolton is protecting the value of a future book deal. That could certainly be. And a few other things here that we might be able to sneak in as we begin the music for our last break. Mike Musson noting earlier in the show that Rachel Maddow shared some excerpts from the new Anonymous book. Oh, yeah. One part was how Trump hates written briefings and wants a simple picture. I think that's what is said, and I think that's what is said is supports the theory that Trump can't actually see anything else and also has the attention span of a puppy. Yeah. Well, no surprise to most of us there. We'll be back in 2 minutes to introduce some more confusing information. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. Except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see if we can't clear this up with a little Googling over the break. Interestingly, while I was Googling, I should point out that it was the impression of nearly all who wrote in mainstream traditional media sources about the handling of the Cooperman case by Judge Leon that the case had been in fact expedited or fast-tracked by the judge. Although I didn't get that sense from Lawrence Tribe or from the others who thought that waiting to begin proceedings until mid-December was all that fast. I mean, I guess as federal cases go, that's not bad, actually, to get a ruling in very late October, early November that, okay, we'll begin trial in December isn't a bad turnaround. It could be much, much worse, certainly. But delaying a month in this situation when we're waiting on 3 or 4 more. And as the committee letter said in the end, they could see the writing on the wall here that this was a game of rope-a-dope. You would wait until December to start proceedings on the Cooperman case, and in the meantime, Bolton would say, what we do depends on the outcome of the Cooperman case. Cooperman begins, quote-unquote, in December, but who knows how long it takes to actually get the ball rolling and have the actual case be presented, how long it takes the judge to rule, whether or not the judge rules in favor of the House. You can imagine Cooperman then appealing the case to the D.C. Circuit and then insisting that they'll appeal onto the Supreme Court, et cetera, and it ends up being years before you get a ruling on that, and at which point Bolton says, well, I won't abide by the Cooperman ruling anyway. I want to start all over again and claim that the circumstances are different from me, and it could be 3, 4, 5 years before you finally have it handed down, if you have it handed down from the Supreme Court. Yeah, you actually have to testify, but it's all moot now, so forget it. And we're back where we started, really back in the days of the other Bolton, Josh Bolton, and Harriet Meyer's testimony being demanded by subpoena from Congress, and basically not getting a ruling that, yeah, you have to testify until the administration about which they were meant to testify was already out of office. So that's always been the game. Trump didn't invent it. Anyway, in looking around, I did find a tweet, maybe the tweet that I was looking at, that suggested that the case hadn't been dismissed. This is Ann Marimo, who is reporter for the Washington Post, tweeting on Wednesday, I guess. Yeah, yesterday was the 7th. So Wednesday evening, Judge Leon declined to immediately dismiss the case in a brief conference call Wednesday night, saying Any decision to withdraw the lawsuit is up to Cooperman, according to a transcript of the call, as according to the reports of Spencer Sue. But I guess I'm going to now look through his timeline and see if there's any addition to that. Did he report on that? Did he print a piece on that? I'm not really sure. But maybe we can catch up with that on another day, perhaps next weekend. That doesn't seem like imminent weekend development likely to come out of that. Just wanted to clear things up before moving on to the next story. Okay. So that's where we are with that. Yeah. Oh, yes. Right. Here was another tweet. This one from Andrew Desiderio, saying Judge Leon seems to want to issue a ruling in the Cooperman case anyway, according to Josh Gerstein. So I've got all kinds of tweets on this one. Even though the House withdrew its subpoena, Leon says it is critical in my judgment that this matter remain on track. Interesting. Okay. Not certain what he wants to do with it. Could be, look, I don't want the Trump administration people playing games with this stuff either. I saw how it went in the Bush administration, or because he is a George W. Bush appointed judge. No, you're not taking this away from me. This is my opportunity to free perhaps dozens of, free the consciences anyway, of dozens of Trump administration officials from having to worry about whether or not they should testify by giving you a bad ruling in the Cooperman case, despite the fact that it's been mooted. All right. So interesting. Any more updates to tell us anything about this? I don't think so, but I just thought I'd enter those onto the record so we know what's going on. Nothing likely to happen about it over the weekend, though. Let's see. Maybe we want to spend some time at this point heading into the weekend on catching up on Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman. This seems like a good idea here. There's a couple of traditional media entries on that front in the New York Times, a piece behind the deal that put Giuliani together with a dirt hunting partner. There's also some some reporting from BuzzFeed News that has a piece facing scrutiny of their donation to top Republicans. Giuliani's associates turned to a major Trump ally for help. Also some other stuff. Let's see, a collection of good articles on this. Can't get to all of them. Giuliani cronies planned fraud guarantee infomercials starring Rudy. I thought that was kind of an interesting piece. Let's throw that one in there. Doesn't dig too deep into things, but a Daily Beast piece. Lachlan Markay, Aswin Subasang. I hope we're getting closer to his pronunciation being correct. This was, file this one in the, hey, they have a weird relationship, Giuliani and Lev Parnas thing that I mentioned yesterday and didn't get back to. The Giuliani being godfather to a Parnas child, or I don't know, a child or grandchild or what. Seemed like an odd thing. They're not just attorney-client here. So this is an odd thing for Giuliani to agree to do. As Rudy Giuliani upended U.S.-Ukraine relations with a campaign of shadow diplomacy, another term that is being rejected in certain corners of the online journalism world. This isn't shadow diplomacy. It's not diplomacy of any kind. It's just a shakedown. President Donald Trump on the verge of impeachment, yada, yada. It was also, Giuliani was also exploring a gig as a television pitchman for an anti-fraud company, allegedly, run by two of the men he enlisted to dig up dirt on Trump's political foes in Ukraine. The company was called Fraud Guarantee. You've heard of that one, as ridiculous as it is. Run by Lev Parnas and David Correa, whose name I don't know about the pronunciation of, who were both arrested last month and charged with criminal violations of campaign finance law, charges to which both have pleaded not guilty. Parnas and Correa, Correia. Anybody with any idea on that one? Have you heard it pronounced out loud on TV? Parnas and Correa had used Fraud Guarantee to funnel hundreds of thousands of dollars to Giuliani, with whom they worked closely as he sought to dig up dirt on former Vice President Joe Biden in Ukraine and advance their own business interests in the country. According to two sources with knowledge of the matter, Parnas and Correa had plans to expand Giuliani's role with the company. Giuliani has just said, I was the attorney for their company as well. Fraud guarantee, which is dumb enough. But anyway, as of earlier this year, they were looking to make him into Fraud Guarantee's spokesman and public face, which is not often what the attorney does with respect to their commercial messaging. Their legal messaging, yes. Both sources described a key part of the plan, a television infomercial featuring Giuliani extolling the virtues of Fraud Guarantee and its services. This really seems like kind of a niche company, maybe not one that does well with broadcast infomercials. Seems like a strange idea, and a stranger idea still for him to agree to do it, which I think testifies to the weirdness and closeness of their relationship. Parnas and Correa wanted the ad campaign to start airing on U.S. cable news channels shortly after Giuliani was finished representing Trump in matters pertaining to the Mueller investigation. Guess that didn't work out. The probe into Russian meddling in the 2016 election concluded earlier this year. As you know, Giuliani himself was read in on the Parnas and Correa plans and had multiple discussions with the two men about possibly signing on as their national pitchman, sources say. They're all doing weird gigs, aren't they? Giuliani, the world's most amazing attorney who works for free, is going to be an infomercial spokesman for this dumb company that does nothing. And Lev Parnas, the head of the dumb company that does nothing, plus also a dumb company that pretends to be in natural gas exports and is throwing around money all over the place for the Republican National Committee and some of the super PACs, is also taking side gigs as quote-unquote translator for Dmitro Firtash in his extradition case, in which he's represented by Digenova and Tensing and flying to Vienna. Okay. He patches together an interesting network of sources of income. It's entrepreneurial. Anyway, however, it is not clear whether any footage of those planned fraud guarantee infomercials was ever shot, or if any deal was ultimately officially inked. It's also not clear what purpose a prospective ad campaign would serve, since Fraud Guarantee seemed to be conducting little, if any, actual business. The Wall Street Journal reported last week that the company had no identifiable customers, and its name, which really read literally, seems to be guaranteeing that its customers will be defrauded, appears to have been crafted to sanitize search engine results for Parnas' name, so that people searching for, say, Lev Parnas and fraud would instead find his company. Though, again, the name of the company doesn't actually help clear you from any fraud, so I'm not certain what a great idea that was, but that might just be English not being his first language. I don't know. Daytime cable TV shows are littered with infomercials featuring moderately prominent political celebrities promoting products such as gold and silver investment services, reverse mortgages, and catheters. It's true. The popular sleep line My Pillow, which is led by the president's friend and political ally Mike Lindell, is a frequent cable advertiser. Other Trump world luminaries have gotten into the game of late as well, including former White House official Sebastian Gorka, who can now be seen hawking fish oil supplements in a series of infomercial spots for the company Relief Factor. And I have to believe, based on nothing, that a lot of these I wouldn't doubt are fronts of some kind. There's really no other explanation for it. They can't really be doing enough business to pay for this. Or it's just, we're taking a loss on this. It's just we're laundering payments to you through this garbage company that's just a loss leader. We don't care about the company itself. It's just that Deripaska can't give you this money himself. We have to pretend it's a fee for services. So we need somebody to buy the services. Sure, a fish oil manufacturer. Why not? Giuliani did not respond to questions Tuesday about his role in the potential fraud guarantee TV ads, but he has been willing to offer himself up for infomercials in the past. In 2013, he filmed a testimonial for the identity theft protection service LifeLock, which I imagine he just did to get free LifeLock coverage. Additional details about Giuliani's relationship with the company could emerge as congressional Democrats intensify an investigation into his efforts to co-opt American foreign policy toward Ukraine to the benefit of Trump's political goals. Parnas announced this week that he's willing to testify and provide documents to impeachment investigators on the House Intelligence Committee. We'll see if that changes. An attorney for Parnas and Correa also did not respond to requests for comment. Parnas met Giuliani a few years ago at a political fundraiser, a Republican one, obviously. And the two forged a personal and professional relationship as Parnas and another associate, Igor Fruman, bought their way into prominence in GOP political circles. Giuliani refers to them as his clients, and he and Parnas were frequently seen dining together at the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C., including on the day before Parnas, Fruman, and Correa were arrested. Interesting way of putting it. I think it's true. They met a few years ago at a Republican fundraiser. How they got to one being a godparent for the other's children is not explained here. I'm going to have to look around and see where did we find that, and how did that come up, and what article. And I'm afraid I might have seen it. Well, that might be something I want to search on Twitter. Let's see. Giuliani, Parnas, Godfather. I'm going to have to just do it that way. And I think it was referring to an article, and I put the article in Pocket, and now it's not obvious. Oh, yes, right. Now I remember. Yesterday we mentioned that it was NYC Southpaw tweeting this out as a find from the detail of a New York Times article, which I'll open up here. But the clip saying, in September 2018, Mr. Gucciardo, who I do not know, Mr. Gucciardo stepped in, paying Mr. Giuliani $250,000 on behalf of fraud guarantee, and now we can see the strange machinations behind the scene that make it virtually certain that these are fronts of some kind. So Gucciardo, whoever he is, pays $250,000 to Giuliani on behalf of fraud guarantee, according to people familiar with the arrangement. We'll read about it in a minute. Mr. Gucciardo paid the second $250,000, making it $500,000, not long after he saw Mr. Giuliani and Mr. Parnas in Boca Raton at a bris ceremony for Mr. Parnas' son. I thought Parnas was older than that, but maybe he's just having kids late in life. For whom Mr. Giuliani had agreed to serve as the godfather, which is interesting because I don't think, Giuliani's not Jewish, but whatever. Who cares? Now we're going to have to take a look at that story. That is one of the many, I guess, that we reviewed the headlines of. But I think we're going to have to dive into this one. Behind the deal that put Giuliani together with a dirt hunting partner. Rudy Giuliani wanted $500,000 to help a venture started by a man who would go on to help him in Ukraine. A Republican donor from Long Island put up the money. Ah, yes, okay. Ken Vogel, Ben Protests, and Sarah Maslin Neer. Ah, okay. On this article, new beat, I think, for her. Anyway, get right to it, because we're low on time. It has been one of the enduring mysteries of the impeachment drama. Where did cash-strapped Ukrainian-born American businessmen get $500,000 to pay President Trump's personal lawyer, Rudolph W. Giuliani? W.L. Giuliani, we learned yesterday. It turns out that the money came from a Long Island lawyer named Charles Gucciardo, a legitimate businessman, no doubt, and Republican donor and supporter of Mr. Trump, believe it or not. The payment was part of a deal in which Mr. Gucciardo would become an investor in a company started by the businessman, Lev Parnas, according to Mr. Giuliani, Mr. Gucciardo's lawyer, and other people familiar with the arrangement. He's got his own attorney. That's good news. The money, paid to Mr. Giuliani's firm in September and October of 2018, cemented a relationship between Parnas and Giuliani. Within months, that relationship would evolve into a critical front in the campaign by the president and Mr. Giuliani to pressure the Ukrainian government and start investigations that would benefit Mr. Trump politically. So it really was a rapid ascension here. 2018, he's getting paid $500,000, and somewhere else along the line, I guess we'll find out exactly when. Oh yeah, I'm godfather to your child. Come with me to George H.W. Bush's funeral. Have lunch with you practically every day. Let's go to the Ukraine together. The Ukraine. Once again, old habits dying hard. Back to the article here. Mr. Gucciardo, 62, a plaintiff's lawyer, has not been implicated in any wrongdoing, and since there's no evidence that he was involved in the Ukrainian pressure campaign, I guess that ends there, although I don't know. I mean, he's not implicated in any wrong. I can't point to what the wrong is, except I can say it seems wrong that he would just step in and give Giuliani $500,000 for nothing. Mr. Gucciardo's lawyer, Randy Zellin, said Mr. Gucciardo invested in the company because of Mr. Giuliani's involvement. Okay, helping clear things up. He understood that he was investing in a reputable company, well, he wasn't, that Rudy Giuliani was going to be the spokesman and face of. So I guess because infomercials were planned. Mr. Zellin said, comparing Giuliani's role to the one he had played for the personal data security company LifeLock, which ran commercials featuring Giuliani. When you think of cybersecurity, you think of Rudolph Giuliani, Mr. Zellin said. That is not true. And of course, that brings us to the story that we skipped the other day of Mr. Cybersecurity himself, Rudy Giuliani, getting himself locked out of his iPhone and having to go to the Genius Bar because he couldn't remember his password or find his way back in. The company being promoted, and also butt dialing somebody. That was another story we heard about the other day. The company being promoted by Parnas, Fraud Guarantee, was billed, now we can find out what they say they do anyway, billed as a way for investors to get insurance against the risk of being defrauded. I mean, is that not covered by general insurance? I don't know. Mr. Gucciardo's money was a loan that could be converted into a stake in the company, according to people familiar with the deal. Such things are done, but not always on the up and up. But it is not clear that the stake would have any value since Fraud Guarantee does not appear to have any customers. Mr. Giuliani did not make any commercials for the company or otherwise engage in any public marketing for it. Parnas, who was arrested last month on federal campaign finance charges, has opened talks with congressional impeachment investigators about his role in the Ukraine pressure campaign. The disclosure that Mr. Gucciardo provided the money that put Giuliani in business with Parnas fills in some blanks in a story that has left Giuliani under federal investigation for possible foreign lobbying violations, and Trump facing the likelihood of impeachment by the House. The payment is another example of how Giuliani, a former federal prosecutor and New York mayor, who is facing the prospect of a potentially costly divorce, capitalized on the spike in demand for his services after he signed on as Trump's personal lawyer in April of 2018. And it helps explain how Parnas came to suggest that he and another Soviet-born South Florida businessman, Igor Fruman, had the blessing of a lawyer for the president as they pursued business and political ventures around the world, including Ukraine. In an interview, Giuliani called the arrangement a perfectly legitimate payment, which means it's not, for which Mr. Gucciardo received promissory notes that were convertible into a percentage of the company. It was just a shell company that was a fraud. Giuliani said he verified the stock agreement, didn't, I'm sure, and felt comfortable getting it from somebody as reputable as him, adding that after the payments, I've gotten to know Charles very well. He's a very honorable man, a very good man, which means he didn't know him before and is lying now, I would say. Zellin and Gucciardo did not pay Giuliani personally, but rather made his investment by paying one of Giuliani's consulting firms, Giuliani Partners. Same difference. Gucciardo was simply one of numerous other investors in the company and is nothing more than a passive investor, Zellin said. Parnas and his co-founder and Fraud Guarantee, David Correa, as well as Fruman and another associate, Andrei Kukushkin, were arrested last month, as you know. Well, you know the background and the reasons for that. In an interview last month before he was arrested, Parnas said Giuliani, quote, offered some advice on, quote, unquote, Fraud Guarantee. That's it. He said his efforts to help Trump in Ukraine were self-funded and have nothing to do with our business. Joseph Bondi, a lawyer for Parnas, declined to comment, as did the lawyer for Korea, Jeff Marcus. In 2016, Gucciardo donated $2,000 to Trump's campaign and the Republican National Committee and spoke at an event that appears to have taken place at the Trump International Hotel in Washington. In the speech, he accused Trump's Democratic opponent, Hillary Clinton, of perpetrating a fraud on the American people, while saying Trump had, quote, made more people, more workers, more money than anybody in Capitol Hill here. In 2018, he made his biggest donation on record to date, $50,000 to pro-Trump super PAC America First Action and attended an event for major donors at the Trump Hotel featuring appearances by the president and Donald Trump Jr., who has no connection to anything. It was there that he met Parnas and Fruman, so that would have been 2018, not sure what month, but that's where he met Parnas and Fruman, who had recently co-founded a company called Global Energy Producers that donated $325,000 to the PAC. The next month, Parnas, Fruman, and Gucciardo all went on a group trip to Israel. According to people who traveled with them, that's a real tell. That was a weird trip. Gucciardo has no business on it, and I would continue looking into him if I were you, and maybe you want to do it over the weekend. Or maybe by Monday we'll learn that he's mob-connected or some other stupid thing. Those two guys were operators, and they were definitely trying to rope people into their game, whatever their game was, said Anthony Scaramucci, who should be believed about nothing, unfortunately, who was briefly White House Communications Director, as you know, and who was on the Israel trip. He said Fruman and Parnas often cited their connections in Trump's orbit, particularly to Giuliani. Around the time Parnas returned from the trip, he promised to pay Giuliani $500,000 to provide what Giuliani described as, quote, a combination of business advice and consulting, consistent with what my company does, and legal advice, which it would be unwise, I think, to mix with the other thing, and then what happened to the infomercial part. But Parnas, whose business ventures have left him with a trail of debts and lawsuits, did not have the cash, and feared that if he did not come up with it, that he and Mr. Fruman might lose their access to Giuliani, according to people who know the men. Even though they were godparents and whatnot, they were so close. What a weird thing. So he just says, after the Israel trip, I'm going to give you $500,000. Do you have $500,000? No, but I'll get it. Never mind how. In September of 2018, Gucciardo stepped in. Now we have context for this. Paying Giuliani $250K on behalf of fraud guarantee. According to people familiar with the arrangement, Gucciardo paid the second $250,000 the next month, not long after he saw Giuliani and Parnas in Boca Raton at a bris ceremony for Parnas' son, for whom Giuliani had agreed to serve as godfather. Aren't they cozy? By January, Giuliani had enlisted Parnas and Fruman to collect information and make connections in Ukraine that could be used to damage Biden. And that's really the end of the story on that one. I think I'll wrap up without the final flourish of that. That is pretty amazing. That's I think I'm glad we got that one on record before the weekend. I don't know that I expect immediate movement on that over the weekend itself, but you never know when something like that one's going to break. All right, let's see. Definitely a couple other things that I meant to include, and maybe we'll just make them small items before closing things out today. Also, a bunch of big things that I meant to get to and didn't. One weird one. Something I wanted to include in the roundup of fun and interesting local results from Tuesday's election and forgot to include in that roundup. Just a tweet that I managed to pick up on from Nathaniel Rakich, associated with 538 there. He happened to notice this one. Democrats flipped a Missouri State House District, House District 99 in the St. Louis suburbs, 54-46. It's of note because this is an R+11 seat, making for a remarkable 19-point D swing. That is pretty remarkable and well worth noting, I think, in our bigger roundup of things that we noted the other day. Let's see. One or two other things that we might be able to squeeze in before telling you about what's coming up next on Justice Putnam's show. Well, probably not. Let's, why don't we pay closer attention to the clock, get our music rolling, and take one. Oh, yes, now I remember what I wanted to get in there. Oh, all right. Well, what I'll do for this one, since we're not going to get to this one anytime soon, is include this very interesting piece, a one-off piece that would have been fun to discuss, but would make for great weekend reading. In the Washington Post, Natasha Stoynoff, writing under the headline, "Women were the first Trump whistleblowers." I think an interesting take and a reminder of all the various things that were so disgusting and horrible about Donald Trump that he never should have been elected or viable as a candidate in the first place. You know, of course, exactly what we're talking about. But I love the framing that, yes, the whistle has been blown on Donald Trump and people have been blowing that whistle for a long, long time. Don't forget the role that his accusers played in all of this, and throw it all overboard for the shiny object of Ukraine. I think that was a good reminder and well worth reading over the weekend. For now, though, coming up next, of course, right here on Netroots Radio, Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What's he got on tap? Well, there's Giuliani's story, of course. He's hired 3 more criminal defense lawyers. He's going to sing rather than running the risk of ending up in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. You think that's really going to happen? We'll see. There's much more that I can try and cram in after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
With David Waldman.
Much more. As I said, Georgia is sued over their absentee ballot law that could disenfranchise tens of thousands of voters in 2020. The Trump administration ignored career State Department officials' warnings about ending refugee protections, and the White House is urging private industry to modernize the national parks with a vision of food trucks, Wi-Fi, and Amazon deliveries.